Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of CR Gaming's Introduction to series. We've been covering Minecraft Redstone Mechanics, and if you haven't seen them yet, we have a lot of videos covering very basics of Redstone, all the way up through some basic logic gates, and in case you couldn't get the hint from what's going on behind me here, today we'll be talking about Minecraft Redstone Clocks and flip-flops, which will become the basics of kind of advanced computing in Minecraft. And it's also a good introduction to advanced computing in, well, advanced, modern computing in general. Of course, clocks are how your computer determines time, as well as timing and everything like that, and everything associated with timing. And flip-flops and various other systems like that, latches are also something that they're known as, are the basics of data storage. Essentially a way to keep bits, a 1 or a 0, and obviously if you stack up enough of those, which is unwieldy in Minecraft, but you can do it. You could theoretically build a hard drive, a computer, and RAM, and honestly, and people have. As I keep mentioning, there's that person who built a graphing calculator using Minecraft Redstone, and it all starts really with the logic gates and the very basics of Redstone mechanics, but you can start seeing how it functions with clocks and flip-flops. So I want to start by talking about just exactly what a clock is in terms of digital electronics and in terms of Minecraft Redstone. In Minecraft Redstone, similarly to real-life, digital electronics, a clock is anything that generates some sort of signal with some sort of time-based regularity. So as you can see with this clock, it's pulsing around in a circle, and I'm only keeping the signal when it hits this leg of the signal. So for the purpose of the computer, this segment would be the part of the clock that we care about. This is the part that's keeping time. And just to link it back to what I was mentioning before, where I mentioned in a previous video that people used to make redstone repeaters just by linking up a bunch of inverter gates or NOT gates. Here's a clock that is functioning essentially the same as this clock here, but only using redstone inverters created by just a block, a torch, and extra redstone dust. Obviously, it takes up a lot more room, so it's a little more unwieldy, and you'll notice it's pulsing twice as fast. This one goes twice for every one time that this one does. So in order to fix that, you essentially have to make it twice as big. And the reason for this is if you look at this redstone repeater, I have it on the 4th setting. So if you pull out a redstone repeater, it looks something like this. And this default setting starts with 1 length of pulse. So it would be 1 inverter's worth of lag, I guess you could call it. And then you set it 2, 3, 4 inverters worth. So this one is 1, 2, 3, 4 per side. And if you look, the pulse I've created between these two is exactly the same. Although this one has to travel a lot farther than this one. So, and it uses a lot more resources. So generally speaking, when we use a clock, we'll use something that looks similar to this. I think most people in Minecraft are familiar with how this looks. But I do think it's valuable to give a little background on this clock and kind of where it started from. And it also becomes important because you notice there's this lag time when it's traveling through here, and this becomes a major factor in Redstone, in Minecraft Redstone mechanics, because if your signal dies out before it reaches where it needs to go, or for example, if your clock pulse goes blank, before it hits the light, you get this lag, and it's a problem. And it's a problem in real-life computing as well. Not so much now that computers are so small, but back in the day, when computers were extremely large, like the size of a room, if you didn't place your physical components in the right order distance-wise, you could actually run into problems where your signal did not get to where it needed to go fast enough. And I know that sounds insane considering how fast electricity travels, but it is a possibility, and it is something that I've seen happen. So we'll move on to the first of our flip-flops or latches, as I think we've covered clocks enough. This is called an SR-NOR latch. As I mentioned before, latches or flip-flops are the basics of data storage. So as you can see, I've got two outputs. I've got Q, we'll call it Q, or output 1, and we've got Q naught or Q bar or Q inverse. It's just the opposite of Q. This one, Q naught, Q bar, will always be the opposite of Q here. How this is constructed, I mentioned it's an SR-NOR latch. It's just got two OR gates, one here and here, and two NOT gates, one there and one there. A wiring diagram will look something similar to that. A lot of these latches look kind of complicated. That's because I'm doing them purely with redstone torches and redstone dust. There are simpler ways to build them, but I'm building them this way to tie it in with the logic gates that we demonstrated earlier, as all the latches are built out of the basic logic gates that were in my previous video. Essentially what it means is you've got a reset and a set. So you'll notice I'm using pressure plates here and here, and the reason is, the whole point is to store a data value. So if I reset, I have pressed on the pressure plate, and now I've stopped pressing on the pressure plate. But you'll notice that this light is still off, and this one is still on. And no matter how many times I press this pressure plate, it will stay the same. Similarly with the set, I can get it to change so that now this output is 1, and this one is 0. So Q is 1, and Q bar is 0. And no matter how many times I press this pressure plate, the input will stay the same. So the advantage of latches, as you can see, is I can take a pulsed signal, like a button or a pressure plate, or even a minecart going over a rail, and I can store that data value for essentially forever, as long as I want. So this is an SR-NOR latch. Similarly to the SR-NOR latch, we have the SR-NAND latch, or SR-NAND flip-flop. It does the same thing, except it's built out of NAND gates. A slightly easier one to get a visual of what's happening. However, it does not allow for the Q and Q inverse unless you add just a NOT gate. This is called the SR-NOR latch. It's something that I found on the internet by a digital electronics teacher who was looking for simpler latches to teach his high school kids. And I actually quite like its simplicity. So it does essentially the same thing as the SR latch, except it gets rid of the problem of the set and reset both equaling 0 and causing all the lights to go on. Which is, it should be an impossible situation, because Q and Q bar should be opposites. This one gets rid of Q bar, so there is no opposite. And you can see, when I set input 1, it keeps that data value even though the pressure plate is turned off, and even though this pressure plate is turned off as well. When I reset, it turns it off. So how this works, and how this is built, is you have your OR gate here, and I know this looks a bit different than how I've typically constructed OR gates, but if you look, the OR gate is powered based off of this output, and it goes back into there, or this pressure plate. So when I press this pressure plate, it initially lights up this whole circuit here. When I step off of the pressure plate, this part of it is no longer actively powered in the sense of a signal being generated. It is, however, being powered by this. So this area right here is that OR gate. Then you have just an inverse gate here leading into an AND gate. So it's an AND OR flip-flop. Now, in terms of digital electronics, one of the more commonly used flip-flops is the JK flip-flop, or the JK latch. And the reason is it brings in a clock that acts as a gate and a signal buffer to make sure that all those little signals don't get in the way of what you actually want to do. So essentially, you tie your output to a clock so that the flip-flop will only flip or flop if the clock says it's time to do so. This is how you get around a lot of the issues with the distance thing that I mentioned before. It's also useful in Minecraft because of the lag around the wires that I demonstrated with those with the inverse gates. The problem with Minecraft is you can't build a JK flip-flop in the traditional way. And I'll show you what I mean. If you haven't been paying attention to the video and paying attention to my face instead, you may have missed it, but you'll notice here that the flip-flop here, it's pulsing. It doesn't know what it's doing. The lights are going on and off. It's going crazy. It doesn't know what it's doing. And you might think, oh, it's because the clock is it's letting it do stuff. And that's true. There is a toggle component of a JK flip-flop where no matter if both your inputs are active, every time the clock cycles, it should flip every time, and it'll toggle. However, I've taken away the clock now, and you notice it's still happening. And the reason is there's enough of a lag between the outputs of this flip-flop and where it comes back to the front that the signal is not catching up with itself. This is actually a known problem with JK flip-flops. In real life, they've run into this problem with JK flip-flops, and in Minecraft, there you go. You can run into this problem with JK flip-flops. So, I'm going to ignore this design because it's crap. And luckily, we have some redstone geniuses out there who have come up with a better JK flip-flop for all of us Minecraft electrical engineers out there. This is a JK flip-flop. It does the same thing, but it's a bit different. So you'll see my Q output here is lit up. Both of my outputs are off. I've got my clock going around. I've got it going around really rather slowly so that we can watch it and make sure that it's doing what we want. So how does this work? We've got our set, or our J, part of the JK, and we've got our reset, or our K, part of the JK. We've got a lot of redstone torches and wiring going on here. A schematic of what that looks like will be here. So since the light is already on, that means our set value has already been determined. So we're going to have to reset it if we want to see a change. So what should happen, and what we expect to happen, is when I flip this reset button, nothing will happen initially until that clock goes and gets a signal right there. So let's watch. So watch the lever, the light, and the clock. The light has now gone, clock went, and now the light went. And now that the lever is still open, the light will still be off. If I turn off the lever, you'll notice the light still stays off. It is storing that data value. Whatever I did to it last, it is keeping in mind, and it is remembering. So let's do the opposite now and do the set, or the J part of the JK flip-flop. And the light should turn on with the clock. There it is. And now, even if I turn off the lever and the clock goes, the light stays on. But the final part of this, the JK flip-flop has a toggle function, meaning it will toggle the output from on to off in accordance with the clock, but only if both levers are pushed or if both inputs are on. And this might seem like a kind of silly thing because you could just set it to the clock, but this allows you to set the toggle to only happen under certain conditions, such as when both your inputs are positive. say you want a bunch of arrows to fire from a hopper, but only if you're standing there and a mob is over there. You could, I guess, theoretically do an AND gate, but this allows it to pulse in exactly the amount of time that you want it to, which is in accordance with the clock. Which in this case is rather slow, however, you can make it faster. Now, this is not the most compact design, as you can see. And again, luckily for us, some Redstone geniuses out there have come up with more compact designs. This final design I'm going to show you is called a T flip-flop, and I've labeled it here a practical T flip-flop because it's very practical for your actual Minecraft builds. It doesn't have all the same components as the JK flip-flop that is shown previously. It doesn't have the clock, it doesn't have the ability for 2 inputs, but it does still toggle every time you hit a button. It keeps whatever signal you did from a pulse signal, such as a button or a pressure plate, and it'll keep that active until you hit the button again. So to demonstrate, here's the button, the light is on, I'm going to press the button, and the light stays off. If I press the button again, the light turns on. This is a toggle flip-flop, essentially. Every time I hit the input, it should toggle on or off. So how this is built is you've got 2 droppers, one here facing this hopper and this redstone comparator, and this dropper here, which is facing upwards into this dropper. I've got in there just a hopper. You can put basically any item you want. A lot of people recommend non-stackable items such as swords or something like that, so that your signal is always strong. I just add a redstone repeater to get rid of the strength of signal problem, because no matter what signal you get out of this comparator, it will give you a 100% signal if you have that repeater. And then you have this hopper here to throw it into the bottom dropper when it drops out of the top. You have a comparator here to show whether or not the item is in this top hopper. If it's in the lower dropper, this redstone comparator will be off. You could invert the signals using an inverter logic gate or a NOT gate, but this works just as well. And as you can see, it's a fairly compact design. It's literally 4 blocks for the actual flip-flop itself. Everything else is just signal maintenance. So here, using that very simple T flip-flop design, I've built a very basic 2x2 piston door, which I know a lot of people like to use for their bases. And I did demonstrate a similar concept using an XOR gate in my previous video about logic gates. However, this is a bit of a different take, because instead of relying on 2 levers, now I just have 1, and I can still do both things and keep the door open as long as I want, using only 1 button. So to demonstrate, here the door is closed, as you can see, and it will remain closed for as long as we want. We could wait here for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter. If I press the button, however, it will open up. So open says I. And there you go. Voila. It opens up, and again, it will stay open as long as I want. Using this same button, I press it again, and the door closes. So how did I build this? Well, you already know the T flip-flop place. I just have the T flip-flop, and it's just going into 4 different pistons. 1 here, 1 here, 1 down there, and 1 over here. I know there are better ways to make these 2x2 piston doors. This is just the way that I've decided to lay it out for this video. You can also do this with the stacking doors, the 3x3 stacking doors, 4x4s, whatever else you want. And the advantage of the T flip-flop is, like I said, it only uses 1 single button to handle all the work that any other logic gate or most other flip-flops would require with 2. That is why I have called this the practical T flip-flop or compact T flip-flop. This isn't my invention. This was done by somebody else, I think I mentioned. It's been done by many people before, and there are a lot of different designs on compact T flip-flops. I do recommend experimenting around with them because some of them do different things and they handle the situations slightly different. Anyway, as I hope you can see by now, flip-flops, although that one doesn't work very well, but flip-flops are a very useful way to begin data storage, and clocks, along with flip-flops, are what you can use as the basis of all your Minecraft computing needs, along with logic gates as well, which really flip-flops are just a combination of logic gates. I know these last few have gotten a bit technical. I will go back into more of the very basic concepts of Minecraft and how Minecraft works, and I'll also get into some more practical demonstrations using these logic gates and flip-flops. I did, however, want to make this video to show how they were made using the basic logic gates as shown in my previous video, to tie it all together and show you that these flip-flops, latches, and things like that, while they may look complicated and they act a little complicated, and they're really cool in terms of data storage and the things that starts to allow you to do, the concepts are not as complicated as they might seem. They're just basic logic gates put together in a unique way. Again, as always, if you have any questions about any of the topics I discussed today, clocks, flip-flops, or even any of the logic gates, please feel free to reach out. I have plenty of resources, and I know where to find a lot more resources that can describe these logic gates, flip-flops, clocks, and other basic digital electronics and circuitry things much better than I ever could, and using a medium that isn't Minecraft if you're actually going into digital electronics, and using things like wires.